Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for the third in our four-part series of webinars on innovation in coffee communities. We really appreciate you taking the time to learn and exchange with us. My name is Joanna Ferguelli, and I'm the Director of Partnerships and Strategic Initiatives for Neumann Stiftung North America, and I've also been managing the Coffee Kids program for the last 3 years. We will continue these webinars bringing together different members of our team from both Central America and Tanzania, where we have the Coffee Kids program. And today we'll build on our conversation around innovation within farming families with a focus on the tools and methods to address climate change. But before we dig in, just a quick housekeeping notes. Gabriela Tigam, our communications and marketing specialist from Central America, will be coordinating and collecting all your questions. A big thank you to Gabby for all her support. And the way we'll handle questions is through the chat. You can write questions directly to the presenters from there. We'll address a few in the middle of the presentation and then leave a longer time for Q&A at the end. So we invite you to write in those questions as they come up, and we really look forward to answering them. So a quick overview of what we're going to cover today. So we'll start out giving a quick background on Neumann Stiftung and the Coffee Kids program. We'll introduce the topic of the day and address the current COVID-19 crisis. And then I'll be able to turn it over to my wonderful colleagues, Godfrey Wilgold in Tanzania and Javier Reyes in Central America. And so to get started, many of you are familiar with the Coffee Kids, Coffee Kids as a nonprofit organization that started back in 1988. It became a program of Neumann Stiftung in 2015, really building off of the great legacy and community development work that Coffee Kids always did. Just now that the focus is specifically on young adults between the ages of 16 to 35. And Neumann Stiftung, or HRNS, is a nonprofit organization that was established in 2005 by Michael R. Neumann and his family, and it's independent of the Neumann Coffee Group. As HRNS, we address the 12.4 million smallholder farming families worldwide that depend on coffee for their livelihoods. And for more detail, the QR code that you see on the slide here will take you to our full theory of change. To date, we've reached more than 300,000 smallholder families across 18 producing countries. And so with that, we're going to dig into the topic of today, which is building resiliency in the face of a changing climate. So we really believe that the women, men, and young adults in smallholder farming families hold significant potential to be the drivers of more equitable and resilient communities. And so the ideas and tools for climate change adaptation and mitigation really need to be developed and accessed by the whole family. And this is why our theory of change it does incorporate climate change, but it's in a way that addresses the farming family as a unit. Because we have to make sure that climate adaptation practices get into the hands of all the people who can put them into action. So this webinar really builds on our prior conversation. So last week we discussed how women are putting in the majority of labor into agriculture, therefore they really need to be equipped to implement the most up-to-date practices. And this way, both women and men can make good decisions for their families now and be able to turn over healthy landscapes to their children in the future. Then the week prior, we talked about youth. Young women and men will be the farmers most impacted by a changing climate. And yet at the same time, they're also the ones that are most open to new technologies and new practices. So it's only by including the whole family, distributing both resources and knowledge across family members, that we can have the best solutions implemented and replicated. And so we'll continue this webinar focusing in on Guatemala, Honduras, and Tanzania. But as a global organization, we currently have offices across 8 countries with over 270 staff. So we also have offices in Brazil, Uganda, Ethiopia, Indonesia, Germany, and the US. So as all of us are dealing with the impact of COVID-19, there are really some clear parallels between the climate crisis and our current health crisis. Both affect all of us, disrupting the regular patterns of life across the world and exacerbating underlying inequities. Both crises are disproportionately affecting the individuals and communities who are the least able to withstand such an impact. And so they really require all of us to participate in crafting solutions. And so as a first step in response to COVID-19, we've covered a number of things that we've done as a global organization, which have included switching to digital solutions for communication and adapting new project activities. But then in addition to some of the elements that we covered last week, we also wanted to share a few more specific updates from the two key regions that we'll focus on for this series. So in Central America, just in the last week, we've delivered sanitization kits for over 40 pharma organizations and 4 healthcare centers, which would really help them prevent and be prepared to help communities address coronavirus and really, well, hopefully slow down the spread of it, particularly in rural communities. And then in Tanzania, we're able to be back out and doing individual visits with families, which is really important, as I'm sure all of you understand that families continue to need guidance on how to navigate production and harvesting cycles to ensure both food and income during this time. And to make all of this happen, you know, we really value our partners, some of whom you see here and some of you who are listening, who are working with us to really put solutions into action, both during this time of coronavirus, but also both before, during, and after in response to the climate crisis. And I think when it comes to climate change, one really great analogy that I've heard recently that also gives me a little bit of hope is that people often tend to think of climate change as this really big boulder that still needs to be pushed up a hill. But really, that boulder is actually on the downslope and it's moving and there are many, many hands pushing it and putting it in motion, but it just needs to move faster. And so we really appreciate all of the supporters we have who are collectively pushing forward, and we encourage you to continue to bring people on board and have conversations about climate change. Thank you for all that you do. So with that, I would like to introduce our presenters for the day. But before I do that, we had a first question that we like to ask to our attendees. And so I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll, which you should now be seeing on your screen. And the question is, or could you please fill in the answer, the strongest climate impacts being faced by farmers in Tanzania is, and there are a couple of options here. So if you can please choose your top 2 guesses in the poll, that would be great. You can choose more than one. And with that, as you're answering that question, I want to present Godfrey Wilgold, who is our team leader for agronomy in northern Tanzania as part of our team HRNS in Tanzania, and Javier Reyes, who's the climate coordinator in HRNS in Central America. And of course, as I've already introduced, Gabriela Tigum, who's supporting us with communications and marketing, also from the team in Central America. And so with the poll, we will share the answers in just a bit, and Godfrey will be our first speaker, and he'll explain those answers during his presentation. So I'm going to go ahead now and end the poll, and I will turn it over to Godfrey to go ahead and start.
Thank you, Joanna, and thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Godfrey Wilgold. I'm from Arusha, Tanzania. I've been working with HRNS since 2013. I'm leading a team of agronomists in the Northern Zone in the regions of Arusha and Kilimanjaro. My coffee journey started in 2013, just as I joined HRNS. HRNS Tanzania operates coffee and climate initiatives in the northern and southern zones. In the northern zone, we operate in Arusha and Kilimanjaro region, as you can see in this map. In the southern zone, we operate in Mbeya and Songwe. HRN's program in Tanzania has reached a total of 25 coffee farmer families, 15 in the south and 10,000 in the north. With all the coffee and climate initiatives so far, we have reached a total of 15,000 coffee families. Before I proceed, I think it should be good to look at the polling answers. Yeah. Now, from the polling answers, you can see the strongest it is drought, which is one of the biggest impact of climate change in Tanzania. As you can see also from my presentation, that's also what I wanted to present to you. Drought, yes, is one of the main challenge or main impact of climate change in Tanzania. As you can see from my presentation, we have coffee, which has been really affected by drought. And from the picture, you can see that. Also, because of drought, you can see from the second picture from the left, you can see coffee coffee flower has been really affected. And here in Tanzania, we have had cases that coffee has shed flowers because of drought. And also another impact that we have as an impact of climate change is a change in rainfall pattern, and this is in terms of distribution and intensity. This has affected flowering in most cases and overall the plant growth. Other cases, we have had cases of pests and diseases because of fluctuation in terms of rains and temperature. There have been a growth in terms of pest and disease here in Tanzania, and farmers have been really affected by diseases such as coffee berry disease and leaf rust disease. And from my presentation, you can be able to see some of these diseases. Before I proceed to the next slide, I would like to give you a small introduction about the Coffee and Climate Initiative. Coffee and Climate Initiatives is a large platform involving private and public sector, representing importers, roasters, service providers, and international cooperation agents. Initiative for Coffee and Climate was founded way back in 2010 with implementation in regions of Trifino, Brazil, and here in Tanzania. The initiative have a vision of enabling coffee farmer to effectively respond to climate change, and a mission of combine a state art of climate change, science, and proven farming method, but also practical hands-on and applicable tools. And lastly, to form a network of all relevant stakeholders in the field. So these are the mission and vision for the Coffee and Climate Initiatives. Coffee and Climate Initiatives has four main core functions. I'm going to take you through all of them in the couple of slides which are coming down. One of the core function of the Coffee and Climate Initiative is the coffee and climate methodology, or we say the approach. And by using of extension tools such as farmer field schools, farmer field day, and demonstration plots, following the coffee and climate module, coffee producer, farmer extensionist, village extension have been trained in introduction to climate change, adaptation and mitigation practices, and climate smart practices. And just to mention these climate smart practices, like the use of cover crops, field rainwater harvesting, planting of resistant variety, mulching, and the use of shade management. So this in general explain the whole package about the approach that we are using to train our farmers. Another core function is the CNC Toolbox. The CNC Toolbox, this is a compilation of field test tools, case studies, guidelines, and materials, which helps to equip farming communities with valuable information and techniques and practice that are climate resilience. This toolbox is available online and everyone can access it. Within the climate toolbox, there is 5 process systemization that enable farmers to effectively respond to climate change by systematic risk assessment, as well as identification and implementation of sustainable options. From the presentation, you can see the 5 steps, which are setting the scene, assessing of coffee and climate change, adaptation planning, validation and implementation of option, and lastly the lesson learned. And all this can be seen within the CNC toolbox. Also, another CNC coffee and climate co-function is the community engagement. The Coffee and Climate Initiative have been working with the community in developing and implementing of community adaptation and mitigation plan, but also formulating of climate task force and the climate adaptation plan. And this include enhancing in community replanting, and this is in terms of planting of trees within the community, but also tree planting to protect the water source. But also the other activity is to enhance reforestation around the water source through the village community and the local government. But also lastly is to restrict human activities along the riverbank and water sources. So all these have been the community engagement which the CNC initiative has been doing together with the community. And lastly is building resilience, where the Coffee and Climate Initiative has been working with different research institutions. To mention is Tanzania Agriculture Research Institute. Also, we have the Tanzania Pesticide Research Institute. We have the Swedish Chemical Agency. We have the Tanzania Coffee Research Institute. And just to give you a more detailed example, while working with research institutions such as International Institute for Tropical Agriculture, in short we call it IITA, development and testing of climate investment pathway and CNC approach on the trial plot have been done. And this can be seen within the presentation, which is, you can just see it right now. Also, farmer segmentation and development of farmer typologies to facilitate specialized activities has also been conducted. Yeah, so this is in general what we have been doing together with the different research institutions. My other slide is some of the outcomes that we have had after implementing the smart climate agricultures when implementing the coffee and quality, the CNC initiatives. So about 65% of the beneficiaries that I pointed out have adapted the practices that I'm going to tell you. From the presentation, you can see farmers have been able to adapt the use of live mulching. So farmers have been applying it a lot since live mulching is quite available here in Tanzania. But also farmers have been using cover crops, and these cover crops have been also, they're really available from the from different institutes that we are working with, which can really help us to sensitize farmers on using them. Some other outcome of use of climate smart agriculture, it has been the planting of improved seedlings, where farmers have obtained improved seedlings from research institutions such as Tanzania, from TACRI, which is one of the biggest research institutions that we have here in Tanzania. Also, farmers have adapted the use of field rainwater harvesting, and in terms of when there is drought, farmers have really rely on this. For more information on coffee and climate material and readings, they can be found on through the case studies, through the info sheet and the CNC toolbox and source book, which are all available within the CNC website. So from the presentation, you can see the CNC website. Talking through the coffee and climate initiative, we cannot forget to talk about the coffee and climate gender mainstreaming. Women and youth are most vulnerable to climate change due to the lack of knowledge and awareness within the coffee and climate initiative. This knowledge has been addressed to farmer, and because of that, we have seen a lot of impact because of implementing the coffee and climate gender mainstreaming. One of the impacts that we have seen is the promotion of stronger involvement of women in farm organization and decision making on household level. So farmers have been really involved in different decision makings, but also introduction to practical and timely saving technology that addressing women workload and timely poverty. So you can see a lot of technology that have been introduced within the households, and this has really helped to empower women, but also time saving that allow women to frequently participate in trainings. So because of these trainings, farmers have been having a lot of time also to participate in different trainings because they have a lot of time. And lastly, women have driver to climate smart agronomy practice and, resilience. We all know that women are taking or are contributing to a large extent to different agriculture activities. So by giving them time to work on this activity, it has really given them even more boost to participate in these activities. This takes me to the lesson learned within the implementation of the coffee and climate initiatives. One of the lesson learned is that farmers are aware of the impact of climate change and on their coffee production, but also hands-on tools really accepted by farmer if the results are visible within the short time. And last, the coffee stakeholders see the need to address the issue of climate change on a practical level. So these are some of the lessons learned while implementing the coffee and climate initiatives. Uh, a way forward for as what we have learned from the lesson learned. One is promotion of biogas as adoption option on household level. So this will help to cut down the use of charcoal and firewood as mean of energy, but also to facilitate monitoring, sharing, and of exchange through national and international level. I mean international platforms. So this will help to exchange more as what we are doing now. And lastly, mainstreaming introduction to climate change and climate change adaptation and mitigation training through the farmer field school approach. We have learned through the farmer field school approach, farmers have a lot to bring forward because of their experience. So these are some of the way forward that we think it will be good to proceed in the future. Now this takes me to the last slide, which is the Mbokomo Youth Group. I will tell you a story about this group. This is a group which is located in Kilimanjaro. It has 30 members which are aged between 31 to 22 years old. They're engaging in producing eco-friendly charcoal. So the Mbokomo Youth Group, they found a way to differ from other. The challenge by the need of energy for cooking and see how much they can affect the natural resource with the aim to protect climate, limit the deforestation, and making their farm more sustainable. So the group made eco-friendly charcoal briquettes from the ashes, and this you can see from the pictures, which are and the ashes are made from the leftover from the farm. Let's say after they have pruned their farm or any leftover after animal eats, they burn the ashes, and then they bind it with a special binding agent. So they have been doing this project, and in turn they have been able to make money by doing this project. And out of doing this, they have been selling these charcoal briquettes for 5,000 each, which has helped them to first to conserve the environment, but also to earn a living. Thank you very much, Joanna.
Thank you so much, Godfrey, for such a great presentation and for walking through the different methods. And so before, I do want to ask you a question, Godfrey, before I bring in Javier. But first, we have one more question for the audience. So I'm going to launch another poll that Javier will address. And this question is, how much land does a smallholder farmer in Central America have for coffee? So a couple of options, and for this one, you can only pick one choice for this. So Godfrey, before, yeah, just as a follow-up on some of what you were discussing, you talked about a number of different types of climate adaptation practices, but I was wondering if you could share a few of which are most, either most easily or most readily adopted by farmers, which are the ones that, yeah, that they are using first usually.
At the moment here in Tanzania, farmers are really adapting in using the improved variety of coffee seedlings. The reason being, these improved varieties they are more resistant to some of the major coffee diseases, coffee berry disease and coffee leaf rust. So and because of climate change, we have seen an increase in the number of these diseases within the different region in Tanzania. So farmers have really opted to adapt planting these improved varieties, and the improved varieties are easily available because of the research institution that we have within the region. So farmers have really opted to use this improved variety. Not only this improved variety are resistant to pest and disease, but also they have a high yielding capability. So farmers have really adopted into this. But also another thing, farmers have really adapted into the use of field rainwater harvesting, where because of the unpredicted rainfall, farmers have relied on this for harvesting water, and it has really worked well with the farmers within the region. Thank you.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Gabriel. It's exciting to know that there are new varieties that farmers are actually getting access to, and that they're willing and interested to implement those. And then of course the rainwater harvesting, I think is really important. So I know there are more questions for you, Godfrey, but we're gonna come back to them during the question and answer sessions. So at this point I will turn it over. I'm gonna end our poll, and then I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Javier Rivas from our team in Central America. So let's see. Javier, please go ahead. Thank you.
Hello, Joanna. Thank you, and thanks everybody for the attendance. As Geoffrey was explaining, he explained really well the coffee and climate approach, that it was our base on the climate work. So first, I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Javier Rivas. I'm from Huehuetenango, Guatemala. It's one of the main regions that grow coffee in Guatemala. I have been working for HNS since 2018. Before joining, I was working on the private sector, working on export companies in Guatemala and Honduras. Nowadays, I'm the project coordinator for the climate initiatives that are happening in Guatemala and Honduras. And I'm also a fourth generation of a coffee farmer. My family grow coffee in Huehuetenango. So basically, I've been in coffee my whole life. Since I was a child, I have been in the dry patios and in the field. So coffee, it's really special for me, and I see the future of my life going and working there. So first to introduce, I think we have different climate hazards in different regions. So to be in context, I will explain what we have done in climate change in Central America. So we start with coffee and climate, as Geoffrey was saying, in 2014. So we start working mainly in the Trifinio region. So Trifinio, it's where El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala, it's the border. So we start working there. Why there? Because we have seen that that region, it's mainly affected by the climate change. So in the chapter, you can see that Central America, it's one of the most affected areas of climate change. Honduras has the #1 in vulnerability of climate change. So it's really important to us to have the knowledge in all the region and really to test the things that we are going to suggest to the farmer. So for example, in the first pictures, we have, this picture is in Honduras. Before the leaf rust pest that came to the region in 2002, 2014, a lot of farmers start to renovate. So start to renovate, and they want to plant high density farms. They want to make really a good productions. And that's how Honduras increased the productions. But as you can see, there is no shade, there is not cover crops, and there is a lot of things that we can improve in that farm. So basically, Honduras has been producing good yields, but nowadays is affecting, and that has suffered a lot with the production. In the second, that is a frost that happens in Chimaltenango, Guatemala. So a lot of farmers say that, for example, we have to move up in the altitude, but that's not the right answer, right? So we have to adapt to the climate change and be ready to the effects that can happen. In the third picture, there is a picture in Santa Rosa where the flower was born. So the coffee flower was there, but then with the high temperatures that happened during those months, we were not able to have any beans in that crop. And then in the fourth, it's a new plantation that it was planted that year, but it was really suffering because the high temperatures and so Nowadays, we are working in Honduras, in Ocotepeque, Copan, and El Empira. In El Salvador, we have some work in Chalatenango and Metapan, but basically more we are focusing on Honduras and Guatemala. We are working also in Huehuetenango, in Chiquimula, Santa Rosa, and in different regions. So I was showing some chapter about quality. So during the last couple of harvests, a lot of people were growing coffee in 800 meters. They were changing the farms. Now they are growing bananas, they are growing cattle. So a lot of the coffee farms are growing up, but that's not the solutions to climate change. And in Honduras, we have a law that says that above 1,800 meters, we cannot grow any more coffee. So the producers that are moving up and up, they have to stop because above that land, it's only reserves and natural landscape. So we have to be aware that going up, it's not the right answer. We have to adapt. And with that, we have to understand what are the main hazards. So basically, there is the currently work that we are doing in Huehuetenango, Santa Rosa, and this has happened with all the support from you. For example, with Santa Rosa, we have the support from the SAFE platform to be able to test one of the project in Santa Rosa. And with that, I would like to have the answer for the polling that you answered. So you are correct. In Central America, the average of the coffee farmer is 2 hectares. So that's makes things really difficult because if one year make things really bad, for the next year, the food security and all the earnings are really on danger. So basically what we are focusing is to work with these small coffee farmers that have less than 2 hectares and they are our focus. And we want to present these types of methodology, this type of lessons that we have developed in Brazil, in Tanzania, in all the coffee and climate projects countries, and to show that there is an option, that they can improve and they can, with the correct technical assistance, they can make the coffee a sustainable business. So to understand our approach, I think Geoffrey understands well the coffee and climate approach. I will present more our approach as a regional. So we have been working on a regional risk level together with CIAT, for example, when they made the country profile risk assessment and they understand what are the main hazards talking about the country. So we have one for Honduras and one for Guatemala that has just released. And all this information, it's available for you. So you can check and also to present what is happening, what is happening in the regions and where are the more affected regions. Then we move to a regional adaptation. So for example, we cannot work at the moment in all the regions from Guatemala and Honduras, but we have specific regionals. And with that, we have to first take a survey. With that survey, we have to understand really what are the climate conditions, how been the weather for the past 5 years, how are doing the best, which varieties they are growing, which is the area. So really thinking as a survey to understand the regional level. And with that, we have developed our resilient index, that it's a survey that we are taking at the farm level that has all this information and put it together and has indications. So we have to say, okay, these farms need immediately adaptation. The ones that are in the middle need to improve, but they are doing okay. And in green, there is some farmers that because of the knowledge, because of the varieties they are growing, because of the climate smart practices they are including, they are doing okay. But we have to keep working with them in order to be ready. And then we move on a farm level. So on a farm level, we made adaptations plan for training. We have technical teams that go and visit the farms and make a scene. So basically we are taking there on a farm level, the coffee and climate approach. And then we can select the varieties, the shade, and different aspects to not only validate, but also to adapt to the climate change. So this is, as Geoffrey was saying, the on-farm approach by coffee and climate. So first, it's really key to understand what are the hazards, then to assess the coffee and climate solutions and the challenges, then planning and adaptation and adaptation planning. And in this part, it's really important to see when in this part, the farmer organizations make a really good plan, because they can also help us to put this in a next level. Then we have to make the validation and the implementation of the options. So with that, we have demonstration plots when we want to test and have data, and then we have to write the lessons and what is really the understanding. For that, we have case study that it's in the toolbox and also in the web page of Coffee and Climate, when we put all the good things and all the suggestions to be implemented in one specific adaptation plan or climate smart practices. So these are some of the examples that we are suggesting. At the first pictures, we can see the contour lines. So normally the producer were planning a lot of the farms. They were just planting and don't have any importance of the contour lines. So with the contour lines, we want to first have a best distribution of the plant. So for example, if a coffee farmer in Honduras was planting 7,000 plants, now we are saying, okay, you have to plant 3,500 plants, because we want to make it sustainable. So we don't have the first years a big yields, and then in the 5 you have to prune. So we have to do it really correctly. So we have the contour lines, we have cover crops and other parts. In the second pictures, there is an example of a demonstration plot. So this demonstration plot was established with the Alliance for Resilient Coffee. That is another project that we are currently working in Honduras and Guatemala. And the main focus is to show the private sector the effects and how they can adapt to the climate change. So in this, we are putting the shade, we are putting cover crops, but mainly it's the work of the cover crop. So in that case, we are using Brachiaria rusiciensis. So we have been develop and also testing what are the key challenges and how you have to manage in order to not be a threat, but only a good practice. And in the other part, it's the temporary shade and windbreaker. So the main problem in that region was the drought and also the wind, the really strong winds. So we put gandul, that it's a temporary shade, as a windbreaker, and then we put the brachiaria. So that plot was doing okay, because all these climate adaptations that we have to put, but it's one practice that we have to adapt, and that is the knowledge that we have developed through the demonstration plots. Nowadays, with this COVID, I think we have to really work with the food security. So with the farmers where we have the demonstration plots, we have developed a system where we can include maize, beans, and other crops, for example, banana, that will ensure that they will receive the nut food that they are willing to have. So in that, we are now just planting beans. And in the diversification part, for us, it's really important to have other incomes than just coffee. So that's an example of 5 rows of coffee and 1 from lemon. So the lemon, we want to be like something that has all the year. So the people can, if they need to go and to buy fertilizer, they don't go to pit for a low. They can have the money and then make the practices in coffee. So that will benefit the coffee, and also will have benefits from in the family. And we are also testing drip irrigation. So drip irrigation may sounds like really expensive practice, but we are testing as a technique that can make for smallholders, because our focus on work is smallholders. So we are testing one example of drip irrigation that it's on low cost, and really the producer can achieve that goal. So I would like to tell you a little bit about this example of how the youth can improve the farms and how can have an impact on the family. So Don Santos Sanabria, it's the Santos Sanabria family. They are members of the Capucas cooperative that it's well known in Honduras. They are from Copán, Honduras. And Alexander, his son, is 28 years old, and Don Santos is 65 years old. He has been planting coffee and growing coffee for the last 40 years, so he has a lot of knowledge. But when we first went there and talked about all this methodology and all the climate smart practices, he was not really believing. But Alexander says, okay, we can try, we have one demo plot that we are going to establish, so maybe if my father say, okay, I will try to introduce these climate smart practices. So that was the beginning in 2017. And now we have 2 demonstration plots with Santos Sanabria's family. We have one demonstration plot that we are testing different practices and different cover crops. And we have one together with World Coffee Research that is an on-farm technology trial where we are testing varieties and climate smart practices. So he became part of a research person, and now he's really interested in having all this technology in his farms. He's now implementing climate smart practices. So he said, I never thought I would find better and initiative ways of growing coffee. These practices have significantly improved my coffee family's harvest. And here are some of the pictures from Don Santos. He has received a lot of visitors. He has been able to share his knowledge. We have been able to have visitors from Starbucks, Mercom, Atlas, different importers and different companies who are really seeing the effort that he is putting and all the practices that he's testing in his demo plots. So with Alexander, our key part that he was developing is the data collection. So for example, we say that we have to test all these practices and all these cover crops, but without data, we will not share that these practices are doing well. So with Alexander, we suggest that we have to put sensors, then they are buried at the soil, 15 centimeters above the soil, where the roots are. And we want to measure the behavior of the temperature. So for example, in 2017, when we start to establish the demo plot, we've seen that the temperature has not changed because the cover crops and the temporary shade has not really an effect because they are growing. But when they establish for example, in 2018, on May, they start to make the change. So now you can see on the graphic that the blue line has cover crops and temporary shade maintain the average of the temperature on a good position. So that's the thing we want to accomplish. We want to give to the plant the best conditions in the soil, in the environment, to have the better yields, the better productions, and to really don't have those peaks on really high harvest and then low and then dry. So we want to give to the coffee tree the best environmental as possible to maintain the production. And this is the process. In 2017, we start the phase of climate intervention with Santos Sanabria's family. And then in 2018, 1 year of climate innovation, we have seen that there is the demonstration plot. That is a big demonstration plot that it's made in 3.5 hectares. So we have different shades, different cover crops, and we're testing everything. And all the testings, we are testing also the cost. How much is the cost? If they have to put more technology, more fertilizer. So all the costs are follow, and also the grow and the harvest. And with that, I want to thank you. I hope you are interested in learning more, and we will be able to share more of our knowledge that we have been developing for the past years.
Thank you so much, Javier, for a great presentation. And I think, yeah, just lots of great photos exactly demonstrating the types of practices that are being implemented. And so I know we definitely have questions for both Javier and Godfrey. But first, I just wanted to thank them both for all the work that they've done in organizing this information and all the expertise that they share. And I want to thank Gabby for her support as well. And of course, thank our audience for joining us today. Just a reminder to continue the conversation on social media and also through our newsletter. The QR code will take you to our newsletter registration. If you missed either of the first two webinars, not to worry, you can find the recording in our blog. And we'll also follow up with an email later this week to the recording from today. And if there are any questions that we don't have time to answer, we'll also post question and answers in the blog. So as we move to the Q&A session, I just have one other quick question for the audience, and this is can also be an open one, so you can answer the question, but then we'd love to know if there's anything specific, so you can write that into the chat. But I just want to know a little bit about what you're learning, and if you have learned something new over the course of these sessions, if you've participated in more than one webinar, you can think about the whole series. If it's just today, then that's also just fine. And if there's something like of note that you thought was particularly interesting, we'd love to hear that, so please feel to also write that into the chat. So as I leave that open, I just wanted to ask Javier and Godfrey if you don't mind turning back on your camera. So I'll ask you some questions. And Javier, starting with you, I was wondering if you could just share a little bit more about the demonstration plots and how you use them, how they're used in the region.
Thank you, Joanna. Well, basically, we're using as also in two ways. We have different types of demonstration plots. We have one that is the validation plots, that we have to test really the climate smart practices or the variety that we are suggesting in a small part. So, for example, will be less than 100 meters. So in that part, we want to really understand how it's good, the behavior, how it's going to do it before we put it on a next level. In the next level will be the adaptation plot, that it's, for example, the work from Don Santos, that the Santos and Abres family, that it's a big part that we are testing already in a different way.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Javier. And yeah, maybe a question for you, Godfrey, is we had one come up, is maybe you could talk a little bit about what are the steps, when you first get to a coffee farm, how do you know what needs to be done at that farm? And sort of what are the actual first steps that you do with that farming family to decide what practices to use?
Thank you, Joanna, for that nice question. The first step that we use first, if it's the new farm or it's an old farm. For the cases of a new farm, there are some practices that you can do. One of the practices is to advise the farmer on the use of improved variety. Since we know in Tanzania we have the variation in terms of the climate, like the too hot, or sometimes we have drought, so we can advise farmers to have the new improved varieties. But in terms of the old farm, once we see the farm, we can just advise the farmer on the use of the let's say mulching, or the use of rainwater of the farmer. If they are staying in regions where they receive little amount of, so we can easily advise farmers to use the rainwater harvesting structures, or to use the mulching. And this depends on how the farm looks like.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, so you're just really a lot of just kind of walking through with the farmers what's available, what are the impacts they're most facing, and then picking and choosing practices from there. So really tailoring the practices based on the needs of that farm or that regional area. Okay, that's great. And so Javier, another question to you is, I was wondering, yeah, we had a question from the audience a little bit and I know people have been interested in understanding a little bit more the impact on coffee quality. And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about kind of the connection and impact between climate change and coffee quality.
Thank you, Joanna. Well, that's a really good question. And I think for me, as I really are in the copying part because I also have developed this knowledge through the commercial part. So I think one of the key is that, for example, the hazards that are affecting the farms, for example, the frost, the high temperatures, make the quality really have a problem. So, for example, those areas that were doing okay, for example, 1,500 meters, now they have to go up. So now the weather is changing, so the temperatures are different, the fermentation has occurred differently, the yields are suffering. So regarding on quality, the whole part that it's including the soil temperature, the varieties, so how they are doing well, it's going to affect the quality. So that's why we have to adapt and adapt our farms in terms to create this environmental to the plant express the best quality as possible. So I think it's a combination of different things that can affect quality and can affect the process and the dry, for example. So there's many things that of the climate change that affect quality. So I'm sure you can understand more how it's going to affect.
Yeah, no, that's great. Obviously, yeah, there's a lot of connection between the two. And Godfrey, I know one question that came from the audience for you was just a question around has there been any increase in migration from farming communities in Tanzania as a result of climate change? So as you see kind of an increase in the impacts of climate change, are you also seeing more people making the choice to maybe leave their farming community?
Thank you, Joanna, for that great question. Yes, I've seen a lot of increase in the migration from the normal farming to the use of new techniques. So farmers have really adopted to the use of the new techniques. As I've said earlier in my presentations, farmers have really adopted in the use of improved seedlings, which is something that it was not there before. And because of the impact of climate change, farmers have really swamped into the use of improved seedlings. Not only that, these other practices such as the use of field rainwater harvesting. Over the past 2 years, 1 year I can say, we had like a drought in Tanzania. So it was like in most regions, they were receiving very little rainfall. And it was good that farmers were adapting into these new technologies like the use of field rainwater harvesting, which was really helping to boost their coffee production throughout the year. Yeah.
No, that's great. And Gabby, maybe just a quick follow-up question to that. I know, particularly in northern Tanzania, there is also a lot of work that you do around diversification strategies. And maybe you could explain a little bit about that, about how you work with farmers to make sure they're growing coffee, but they're also growing other crops at the same time.
Yeah, in Tanzania, yes, we are doing a lot of diversification. We have been having programs like the conservation farming agriculture, where still it's in line with the coffee, it's in line with the climate change initiatives, where farmers have been growing beans and maize to sustain their families. And that has been really doing well since the conservation farming that they've been doing. It has been observing the steps on how to combat the issue of climate change. So farmers have been adjusting on how to both get money out of the food crops that they're growing, but also to get food out of it. Yeah.
No, that's great. Thanks for that follow-up. I know that was something Javier also spoke to in Central America, some of the diversification practices. And so, yeah, I think based on our time, Javier, maybe just one more question for you. that you mentioned, so you are a fourth generation coffee farmer. And so you've been working with your family, coffee farming for many years. And yeah, so I was just wondering, have you convinced your family to make any changes on the farm, and how that has worked?
Well, I think when I first graduated from the university, my father was not really believing on my thinking and the way I want to change. So I would start thinking, why we don't change the fermentation? And he's like, no, I have been doing in that part. So that's why I decided to move to other parts to have the knowledge and develop more knowledge and bring it to the farm. So nowadays that I have been able to make the practices and to understand how climate has effect in different regions, now we are adapting at the farm. So in one of the pictures that you made in the presentation, that was part of my family farm. And I think we are really understanding and putting on practices, because I need to put in practices what I'm talking, right? So we have seen the changes, and now we are happy to also to test different varieties and different practices that before it was like, no, we stay with what we want.
Oh, that's great. That's really great. Yeah, to hear about that change over time, and then that you've been able to bring that expertise not only to our organization, which is fantastic, but also to your own family farm. And so maybe just one quick question. Actually, I'm going to switch to one last slide that we had here. Just wanted to share kind of a message from across the world, from all of our offices. And Godfrey, just a quick question for you from the audience was, Javier had talked a little bit about drip irrigation having been promoted as one practice in Central America. And is that something that that you would think about in Tanzania, or is there, I know you mentioned rainwater harvesting, so maybe that's a more practical method in the region, but yeah, I'll let you answer.
Also in Tanzania, yes, we have been promoting drip irrigation, but now here is a different case. Farmers have had really innovated to switch their needs. So they have been using drip irrigation while using the local method of irrigating. So it's not in a full scale, but they have been doing it locally by using the small bottles, and they do the irrigation just within the one stem. So farmers have been trying to do that since we have just small scale farmers here in Tanzania.
No, that's great. Oh, that's really interesting. Okay. Okay. Wonderful. Well, I want to be conscious of our time. And so I just want to thank Javier and Godfrey once again. Thank you so much for all that you've shared with our audience. Thank you to the audience for all of your time and for joining us today and for having a conversation about climate change. I know it's a big topic and it can feel overwhelming, but it's exciting to talk about it. There are solutions. And so I just want to make sure that you walk away with a little bit of hope that we can keep pushing this forward and make positive change throughout all of our communities, not only in coffee farming communities. And again, we'll make sure to send the recording afterwards. And next week, we'll bring all of this discussion together, talking about the key role of farmer organizations and the role that they play in facilitating gender and generational inclusion, as well as access to good agricultural practices, climate smart agricultural practices, and also talking a little bit more about coffee pricing. So thank you again, be well and stay safe and take care.